The city lights blurred through frozen tears as Luna Prescott collapsed against the alley wall, her blood seeping into the pristine snow beneath her trembling body. She couldn't remember how long she'd been running. Minutes? Hours? Time had become meaningless the moment those men had cornered her outside the Obsidian Tower where she worked as a night accountant, their cruel laughter echoing as they dragged her into the darkness. The knife wound in her side burned like acid, and her fingers had gone numb from clutching the torn fabric of her coat against the injury. She'd managed to escape their grasp when a car alarm had startled them, but now she was alone in an alley 3 blocks from the tower, bleeding and freezing as the winter storm intensified around her. Luna had worked at Obsidian Enterprises for 8 months without ever meeting the owner. The entire top floor remained restricted, accessible only through a private elevator that required both a keycard and fingerprint identification. Rumors circulated constantly among the employees that the owner was a recluse, that he conducted all business through intermediaries, that he only appeared after dark. Luna had dismissed such gossip as typical office gossip, focusing instead on the excellent salary and benefits that allowed her to support herself and send money to her younger sister attending university across the country. Now, as her vision darkened at the edges, she wondered if anyone would even notice she was gone. The snow fell heavier, coating her dark hair in white crystals. Her phone had shattered during the attack, leaving her no way to call for help. The alley opened onto a side street rarely traveled this late at night, and the businesses on either side had closed hours ago. Luna tried to stand, but her legs buckled, sending her crashing back down into the snow. Fresh blood bloomed across her gray coat, stark and terrible against the white ground. She pressed harder against the wound, but her strength was fading. 24 years old, she thought distantly. 24 years, and this is how it ends. Not from some grand tragedy, but from being in the wrong place at the wrong time, targeted by men who decided she looked like an easy victim walking alone to the subway station. Her eyes began to close. That's when she felt a presence so powerful it cut through even her fading consciousness. The temperature in the alley seemed to drop another 20 degrees, and the falling snow began to swirl in a pattern that defied natural physics. Luna forced her eyes open, squinting through the white curtain of the storm. A figure stood at the entrance to the alley. Even through her deteriorating vision, Luna could see he was impossibly beautiful and utterly terrifying. Tall and lean with an aristocratic bearing, he wore a long black coat that seemed to absorb the light around it. His hair fell to his shoulders in waves of pure white, and his skin held the same colorless pallor, not sickly, but ethereal, like moonlight given form. When he moved toward her, each step was utterly silent despite the snow crunching beneath her own weight moments before. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Even from several feet away, she could see they glowed with an inner crimson light, fixed on her with an intensity that should have frightened her. Instead, some deep instinct whispered that this creature, whatever he was, meant her no immediate harm. "You're dying," he said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries despite appearing no older than his early 30s. The accent was difficult to place European, certainly, but layered with influences from languages that might have been dead for millennia. "Observant," Luna managed, her own voice barely a whisper. Dark humor seemed appropriate when facing death, even if her audience was a hallucination brought on by blood loss. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost but not quite a smile. He crouched beside her with fluid grace, and this close, Luna could see the sharp points of his canines when he spoke. "Who did this to you?" 3 men, maybe 4. Luna's thoughts were becoming fuzzy. "Does it matter?" His eyes narrowed, the red glow intensifying. "It matters very much." He tilted his head, studying her face with recognition dawning across his features. "You work in my building. Floor 37, you stay late most nights, always the last to leave your department." Through the haze of pain, shock cut through Luna's fading consciousness. "Your building? You're Orpheus Obsidian," he confirmed, "and you are Luna Prescott, senior accountant hired 8 months ago on recommendation from the previous finance director." His gaze dropped to the blood soaking through her fingers. "You've been stabbed. The blade pierced your lower right abdomen, likely missing major organs but causing significant blood loss. You have perhaps 10 minutes before you lose consciousness entirely, 20 before death. Are you going to help me, or recite my medical status until I die? Luna asked, surprised by her own audacity. Perhaps impending death made people bold. This time he did smile, revealing those sharp canines fully. I haven't decided yet. Saving you comes with complications. Then why are you here at all? Orpheus stood abruptly, pulling out a phone and typing something with inhuman speed. Because I felt it, he said simply. I felt the moment you fell. Every person who works in my building, who exists under my protection, creates a small thread of connection. Yours suddenly flared with pain and terror, and I... He paused, something like confusion crossing his ancient features. I found myself running before I'd consciously decided to move. A black car appeared at the alley entrance as if summoned by magic, though Luna suspected it had more to do with the phone call. A woman emerged from the driver's seat, also pale and white-haired, dressed in an elegant pantsuit despite the late hour. "Sire," the woman said, bowing slightly, "the medical facility is prepared." "No," Orpheus said sharply. "We don't have time to transport her. I'll have to do it here." He looked down at Luna, and for the first time, something almost gentle entered his expression. "I'm going to save your life, Luna Prescott. But you need to understand what that means. I am not human. I am a vampire, and specifically, I am the vampire king of the Eastern Americas. What I'm about to do will bind us together in ways that neither of us can fully predict." Luna should have laughed, should have dismissed his words as the ramblings of a madman, but looking into those glowing red eyes, feeling the unnatural cold that radiated from his presence, she knew he spoke the truth. Every childhood story, every legend her grandmother had told her about the creatures that walked in darkness, all of it was real. "Will I become—" She couldn't finish the question. "No," Orpheus said firmly. "You'll remain human. But my blood will heal you, and in doing so, it will create a connection between us. You'll be able to sense me, and I you. The bond will make you somewhat resistant to other vampires' influence, which will actually offer you protection. But it's permanent, Luna. Once forged, it cannot be undone." The snow continued to fall, and Luna could feel her heartbeat growing irregular. In the distance she heard sirens, but they seemed to be moving away rather than toward them. She had seconds to decide, not minutes. "Do it," she whispered. Orpheus knelt beside her again, this time gathering her into his arms with surprising gentleness. His supernatural strength made lifting her seem effortless despite her 5'6" frame. "This will hurt," he warned, "but not for long." He bit into his own wrist with those sharp canines, and dark blood welled up immediately. The blood wasn't quite the right color, too dark, almost black in the streetlight's glow. He pressed the wound to Luna's lips, and the moment his blood touched her tongue, liquid fire poured down her throat. She tried to scream, but Orpheus held her firmly, murmuring words in a language she didn't recognize. The burning spread from her throat to her stomach, then radiated outward to every limb. When it reached the knife wound, the pain intensified to unbearable levels before suddenly vanishing entirely. Luna gasped, sucking in air as her vision cleared with startling sharpness. The world looked different, sharper. She could see individual snowflakes now, could distinguish the unique pattern of each one as they fell. The sounds of the city, previously muted by her fading consciousness, now seemed almost too loud, and beneath it all, she felt a warmth that seemed to emanate from the man holding her connection, like a golden thread stretching between them. "Breathe," Orpheus instructed, his voice cutting through her sensory overload. "Your perceptions will be heightened for the next few hours as the blood works through your system. It will settle." Luna looked down at her side. The blood still stained her clothes, but when she pressed tentatively against the area, there was no pain. The wound had closed completely, leaving only smooth skin beneath the torn fabric. "Impossible," she breathed. "No," Orpheus corrected, "simply beyond human capability." He stood again, still holding her as if she weighed nothing. "Seraphina, return to the tower and summon Cassius. Tell him I need a full investigation team working backward from this location. I want to know everything about the humans who attacked Miss Prescott, names, addresses, family connections, criminal histories, every detail of their miserable lives." The woman named Seraphina bowed again. "And what shall I tell the council, sire? They'll sense what you've done. Creating a blood bond outside of courtship protocols will cause questions." Orpheus's expression darkened, and Luna felt a wave of cold fury roll off him through their new connection. Tell the council that their vampire king answers to no one regarding whom he chooses to protect. If they take issue with my actions, they're welcome to challenge me directly. Serafina smiled, clearly enjoying the prospect of delivering such a message. As you command. She disappeared into the car and drove away, leaving Luna alone with the vampire king. Can you stand? Orpheus asked, though he made no move to set her down. Luna nodded, and he lowered her carefully until her feet touched the ground. Her legs held, though she swayed slightly. Orpheus steadied her with a hand on her elbow, and even through the heavy coat, Luna could feel the supernatural cold of his touch. I need to take you somewhere safe, he said. Your attackers may return, and now that you're connected to me, you're in even greater danger than before. There are factions among my kind who would love to exploit any perceived weakness in my defenses. I don't understand any of this, Luna admitted, wrapping her arms around herself as the cold finally registered. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking for entirely different reasons than blood loss. Vampires are real. You're some kind of king. You saved my life with your blood, and now we're connected. This morning I woke up worried about quarterly reports and whether I'd have time to grab coffee before my shift. How is this my life now? Orpheus studied her for a long moment, and Luna realized he was genuinely considering how to answer. Most people in his position would have offered platitudes or dismissals, but he treated her question with the seriousness it deserved. Because fate is rarely convenient, he said finally, and because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or perhaps the right place at the right time, depending on your perspective. He gestured toward the street. Come, I have a car waiting 3 blocks from here. We'll go to my private residence where you'll be safe while I deal with the humans who dared to harm one of mine. Luna followed, partly because she had nowhere else to go, and partly because something about Orpheus inspired a trust that her logical mind couldn't quite explain. The blood bond, she realized. She could feel his intentions through the connection, not his thoughts exactly, but his emotional state. And right now, beneath the cold fury at her attackers, she sensed a protective determination focused entirely on her. They walked in silence through streets that had grown quieter as the storm intensified. The vampire moved through the snow without disturbing it, while Luna left a clear trail of footprints behind them. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but exhaustion was setting in, not physical weariness, but the mental fatigue of having her entire understanding of reality rewritten in the span of minutes. The car that waited was a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows so dark they seemed to absorb light. The driver's door opened as they approached, and another pale-skinned, white-haired figure emerged, male this time, dressed in a formal suit despite the late hour. Your Majesty, the man said with a deep bow, I've prepared the North residence as requested. Security teams are being positioned as we speak. Good, Lucian. Orpheus opened the rear door and gestured for Luna to enter first. She slid across the leather seats, and he followed, the door closing with a heavy thunk that suggested it was reinforced far beyond normal car standards. As they pulled away from the curb, Luna finally voiced one of her burning questions. Why do you live in the city? I thought vampires avoided populated areas. Orpheus turned to look at her, and in the dim interior lighting, his features seemed carved from marble. That's a common misconception, propagated largely by vampire leaders who prefer to hide in remote locations. I believe in something different. For centuries, my kind has lurked in shadows, treating humans as either prey or servants. I've worked to change that paradigm. Obsidian Enterprises employs over 3,000 humans across 15 cities. We pay competitive salaries, offer excellent benefits, and maintain strict protocols against any vampire employee feeding from or harming human co-workers. You run a corporation to promote vampire-human cooperation? Luna asked, trying to wrap her mind around the concept. I run an empire, Orpheus corrected without arrogance, simply stating fact. The corporation is one aspect. I also oversee territorial agreements with werewolf packs, maintain diplomatic relations with the witch covens, and arbitrate disputes among vampire families. The Eastern Americas territory stretches from Canada to Panama, encompassing millions of supernatural citizens and even more humans who have no idea we exist. Luna leaned back against the seat, overwhelmed. And you managed all of that while I was upstairs worrying about expense reports. A sound escaped Orpheus that might have been laughter. Your expense reports ensure my operations run smoothly. Every role matters, Luna Prescott, from the night cleaning crew to the executive board. That's why when I felt your pain, when I sensed one of my people in mortal danger, he trailed off, jaw tightening. No one harms those under my protection. No one. The car turned into an underground garage Luna didn't recognize, descending several levels into what must have been a private parking structure. When they finally stopped, Lucian opened the door to reveal an elevator carved entirely from black marble veined with silver. The doors stood open, waiting. Orpheus led Luna inside, and she noticed there were no buttons. The elevator began ascending the moment the doors closed, apparently responding to his presence alone. Her ears popped as they rose, and she realized they were climbing much higher than a normal building would allow. "Where are we?" she asked. "The Spire," Orpheus answered. "My private residence, built into what humans believe is simply a luxury apartment tower. The top 15 floors belong entirely to me, warded and protected by blood magic older than this country. You'll be safe here." The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that stole Luna's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the storm still raging outside, but somehow seeming distant and harmless from this height. The interior combined modern luxury with Gothic elegance, sleek furniture, and dark woods and rich fabrics, artwork that looked centuries old, and subtle lighting that cast everything in warm amber tones. But what caught Luna's attention most was the complete absence of mirrors. Every wall, every surface reflected nothing. She turned to Orpheus with raised eyebrows. "Vampires don't cast reflections," he confirmed, an unfortunate truth that makes interior decorating challenging. "I've adapted." A woman appeared from a side hallway, and Luna did a double take. Unlike Seraphina and Lucian, this woman had warm brown skin and dark curly hair. She was human. "Your Majesty," the woman said with a respectful nod, not a bow. "I've prepared the guest suite as requested and contacted Dr. Miranda. She's on her way." "Thank you, Celeste." Orpheus placed a gentle hand on Luna's lower back, guiding her toward the hallway. "Celeste serves as my household manager and has worked for me for 12 years. She knows everything about my nature and chose to stay anyway." Celeste smiled warmly at Luna. "Welcome to the Spire, Miss Prescott. I've laid out some clean clothes in your suite. We're about the same size, I think. The bathroom is fully stocked, and there's food in the sitting area if you're hungry." "Thank you," Luna managed, still processing everything. The guest suite turned out to be larger than Luna's entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in silk sheets the color of deep burgundy. The attached bathroom featured a shower that could comfortably fit 4 people and a soaking tub positioned in front of yet another massive window. Luna stared at the view, watching snow swirl against the glass. "You should clean up and rest," Orpheus said from the doorway. "Dr. Miranda will want to examine you despite my blood's healing properties. She's a vampire physician and will ensure there are no complications. Tomorrow evening, we'll discuss what happens next." Luna turned to face him. "Tomorrow evening? What about tomorrow morning?" "I'm a vampire, Luna. I'm physically incapable of being active during daylight hours. The sun would kill me within minutes of exposure." "But the building, Obsidian Enterprises, operates during the day. With human executives managing daytime operations and vampire leadership handling all evening business, it's an efficient system." He moved slightly into the room, and Luna noticed he waited for her unconscious nod of permission before fully entering. "I realize you must have countless questions. I'll answer all of them when you're rested and no longer in shock." "I'm not in shock," Luna protested. Orpheus raised one elegant eyebrow. "You're trembling. Your pupils are dilated, and I can hear your heartbeat racing despite the physical danger having passed. That's shock, though you're handling it with admirable composure." Luna looked down at her hands and realized he was right. They shook with fine tremors she hadn't noticed. The adrenaline that had sustained her was crashing hard, leaving her feeling hollowed out and fragile. "Will you be here when I wake up?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for the question. But Orpheus didn't mock her. Instead, his expression softened in a way that made him look less like an ancient king and more like a man genuinely concerned for her well-being. I will. I'll be in my study down the hall. If you need anything at all, simply speak my name. The blood bond will carry your voice to me, regardless of distance within the spire. He left, closing the door silently behind him. Luna stood frozen for several seconds before her legs suddenly refused to support her weight anymore. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, staring at her blood-stained clothes. She should shower, should change, should eat something, should process the impossible reality she'd stumbled into. Instead, she fell backward onto the silk sheets and let the tears come. She cried for the terror of the attack, for the pain of the knife wound, for the casual cruelty of men who'd seen her as prey. She cried for the loss of her normal life, for the impossibility of explaining any of this to her sister, for the weight of secrets she now carried. And underneath it all, she cried because somewhere in her chest, a warmth pulsed with every heartbeat, the blood bond, connecting her to a creature who shouldn't exist, but had saved her life anyway. Eventually, the tears subsided. Luna forced herself off the bed and into the bathroom, stripping away the ruined clothes and stepping under water hot enough to turn her skin pink. She scrubbed away the blood and grime, watching the water circle the drain in rusty spirals. The clothes Celeste had left fit reasonably well, soft pajama pants and a long-sleeved shirt in deep gray. Luna dried her dark hair and found her reflection in the mirror oddly unchanged despite everything that had happened. She looked like herself, like Luna Prescott, boring accountant who preferred spreadsheets to people and had never done anything more adventurous than trying a new Thai restaurant. Yet she could feel the blood bond humming beneath her skin, connecting her to the vampire king who currently sat somewhere in this impossible penthouse. There was food as promised, a selection of sandwiches, fruit, and surprisingly, hot soup in a thermos. Luna ate mechanically, fuel rather than pleasure, though her enhanced senses made everything taste more vibrant than she expected. When she finally crawled into the enormous bed, she thought she'd lie awake for hours wrestling with her new reality. Instead, she fell asleep within minutes, the blood bond providing an unexpected sense of security she couldn't logically explain. Luna woke to darkness and momentary panic before remembering where she was. The storm had passed, leaving the city glittering with lights against the night sky. She checked the clock on the nightstand, 9:47 p.m. She'd slept for hours. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Luna called, sitting up and running fingers through her tangled hair. Orpheus entered carrying a tray with what smelled like fresh coffee and pastries. He'd changed from his coat into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt that made his pale skin seem to glow. His white hair was pulled back at his neck, revealing the sharp angles of his face. "You let me oversleep," Luna accused without heat. "You needed rest." He set the tray on the table near the window and took the chair opposite, gesturing for her to join him. "Dr. Miranda examined you while you slept. Don't be alarmed. Celeste was present and you remained fully clothed. The doctor confirmed that my blood healed you completely. There shouldn't be any lingering effects beyond the blood bond itself." Luna poured coffee, noting that it was prepared exactly how she preferred light cream, no sugar. "How did you know?" "I pay attention to my employees," Orpheus said simply. "You take your coffee from the break room the same way every morning when you arrive for your shift." "You watch the break room cameras?" "Sometimes." He tilted his head, studying her. "You fascinated me, Luna Prescott. Most humans approach their work with either enthusiasm or resentment. You displayed neither. You simply existed in perfect, competent neutrality. It intrigued me." Luna wasn't sure whether to be flattered or disturbed that the Vampire King had apparently been monitoring her coffee habits. "That's a generous interpretation of boring." "Boring?" Orpheus leaned forward slightly. "In the 8 months you've worked for me, you've caught 3 significant accounting errors that would have cost the company millions. You work until the building is empty most nights, not from obligation, but because you genuinely prefer the quiet. You declined a promotion to day shift management because you value competence over prestige. That's not boring, Luna. That's integrity." Heat crept up Luna's neck. She'd never heard anyone describe her in such terms before. To her family, she was the reliable one. To her few friends, she was the responsible one. To herself, she was just adequate. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Orpheus sat back, and something unreadable crossed his features. Because in approximately 2 hours, the Vampire Council of the Eastern Americas will arrive to question why I created a blood bond with a human employee. They'll suggest I did it impulsively, carelessly, or worse, that I've developed an inappropriate attachment that compromises my judgment. I want you to understand before they arrive that I don't save just anyone, Luna. I saved you specifically because in the seconds when I felt your pain, the thought of you dying became completely unacceptable to me. The coffee cup trembled in Luna's hands. You barely know me. I know enough. His red eyes held hers, and through the bond, Luna felt the absolute certainty of his conviction. And I'll know more, if you'll let me. Before Luna could respond, the air in the room suddenly grew oppressively cold. Orpheus stood immediately, positioning himself slightly in front of her chair. They're early, he said, voice tight with irritation. Stay here. Don't leave this room until I come for you. But, please. The word clearly didn't come easily to him. The council plays political games constantly. I won't have you used as a pawn until you understand the board. He left, and Luna heard the penthouse entrance open with an audible boom. Voices echoed down the hallway, multiple speakers, all carrying the same otherworldly quality as Orpheus's own voice. Luna knew she should obey his instructions, should stay hidden and safe while he dealt with vampire politics. But something in her rebelled against the idea of letting him face questioning alone about a decision that involved her directly. She crept to the door, opening it just wide enough to see down the hallway. The main living area now held 5 figures besides Orpheus. All displayed the same white skin and hair, the same preternatural grace and beauty. But where Orpheus carried himself with calm authority, these vampires radiated hostility and judgment. You exceeded your authority, Orpheus, a female vampire declared. She wore a gown that looked medieval, all flowing fabric and intricate embroidery. Blood bonds are sacred unions to be entered only after careful consideration and council approval. I am the Vampire King, Orpheus replied, his voice colder than Luna had heard before. I don't require council approval for my personal decisions. Your personal decisions become our collective problem when they create vulnerabilities, a male vampire countered. He was broader than Orpheus, built like a warrior from another era. This human girl now carries your blood. She's a walking target for every enemy you've made in 7 centuries of rule. Then perhaps my enemies should consider that harming her would be the last decision they ever make. The threat in Orpheus's words made Luna shiver despite the distance between them. Through the bond, she felt his rage not at her, but at the council for daring to question him, and beneath that, genuine fear for her safety. She's listening, another council member said suddenly, a thin vampire whose eyes seemed to reflect no light at all. The human girl, skulking in the hallway like a spy. All eyes turned toward Luna's door. She had a split second to decide retreat and hide, or step forward and face whatever came next. Something about the way Orpheus stood alone against 5 opponents, defending a choice he'd made to save her life, made the decision easy. Luna pushed the door fully open and walked down the hallway with as much confidence as she could muster. 5 vampires turned to stare at her, their ancient gazes weighing and measuring. She fought the urge to run. Bah, Miss Prescott, Orpheus said, voice tight with warning. I asked you to remain in the guest suite. You asked, Luna agreed, moving to stand beside him despite her terror. I chose differently. The female council member laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, she has spine. How delightful. Tell me, human girl, do you understand what you've become? You're bonded to the most powerful vampire in the Americas, marked with his blood, connected to his very soul. Every enemy he's made in 700 years will now see you as a weapon to be wielded against him. Is your life truly worth that burden? Luna swallowed hard but kept her voice steady. I didn't ask for this. I was dying in an alley, attacked by men who saw me as easy prey. Orpheus saved my life, and if that created complications for vampire politics, then maybe the politics need to change, not the impulse to save someone in mortal danger. Silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the thin vampire tilted his head, studying Luna with increased interest. She speaks to us as an equal, not a supplicant, either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Both, probably, Luna admitted. But I won't apologize for surviving, and I won't let you punish Orpheus for having basic decency. The warrior vampire stepped forward, and Orpheus moved with him, keeping Luna behind his protective stance. You presume much, human. She presumes nothing, Orpheus interjected, power rolling off him in waves that made the lights flicker. She speaks truth. You come to my home at an inappropriate hour, making demands and accusations. You question my judgment while offering no alternative solution. Should I have let her die to avoid council disapproval? Would that have been the politically expedient choice? The female council member raised her hands in a placating gesture. No one suggests you should have let the girl die, Orpheus. We simply question the method of salvation. There are vampire physicians who could have treated her without creating a blood bond. None that could have reached her in time, Orpheus countered. She had minutes, not hours. I made the only choice available that ensured her survival. And now, the thin vampire asked, what are your intentions toward this human girl? The blood bond isn't easily maintained. You'll need to reinforce it periodically, which means keeping her close, protecting her constantly, allowing her access to your private existence. That's considerably more than saving her life, Orpheus. That's inviting her into it. Luna felt Orpheus's hesitation through the bond, a flicker of uncertainty in his otherwise confident presence. He hadn't thought that far ahead, she realized. He'd acted on instinct to save her, and now the council was forcing him to define what that salvation meant long-term. My intentions, Orpheus said slowly, are to ensure Luna's safety and well-being for as long as necessary. If maintaining the blood bond requires her proximity, then she'll remain in the spire where I can protect her adequately. If that arrangement troubles the council, I welcome formal challenges. The warrior vampire smiled, revealing his fangs. You'd start a war over a human accountant? I'd end one, Orpheus corrected softly, and the threat in those 3 words made Luna's breath catch. The 5 council members exchanged glances, apparently communicating through some means Luna couldn't perceive. Finally, the female vampire sighed dramatically. Very well, the council accepts your decision to save the human girl and acknowledges the blood bond as valid, though highly irregular. However, we insist on certain conditions. First, Luna Prescott must be educated on vampire culture, laws, and protocols. Her ignorance could create diplomatic incidents we'd prefer to avoid. Second, she must be assigned a protection detail whenever she leaves the spire. And third, Orpheus, you must acknowledge before the full court that this human is under your personal protection. Make it clear that harming her constitutes a direct attack on the Vampire King himself. Done, Orpheus agreed immediately. Are we finished? One more thing, the thin vampire said, his empty eyes fixed on Luna. Tell me, girl, what do you feel through the bond right now? Luna wasn't sure how to answer, but something about his tone suggested this was a test she couldn't fail. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing on the golden thread connecting her to Orpheus. Protectiveness, she said finally, anger at being questioned, determination to keep me safe, and she paused, surprised by the depth of emotion flowing through the connection. Loneliness, old loneliness, like he's been alone for a very long time despite being surrounded by people. When she opened her eyes, the thin vampire was nodding slowly. The bond is genuine and deep. She reads your emotional state accurately, Orpheus, which means the connection established properly. Be careful, bonds this strong can evolve into something more complicated if you're not vigilant. The council members departed as dramatically as they'd arrived, simply vanishing between one moment and the next. Luna jumped at their sudden disappearance, and Orpheus caught her elbow to steady her. Teleportation, he explained, an ability that comes with age and power. I can do it as well, though I prefer more conventional transportation, unless urgency demands otherwise. Luna sank onto the nearest couch, adrenaline leaving her system in a rush. That was terrifying. You were magnificent. Orpheus sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. Foolish to leave the guest suite when I asked you to stay, but magnificent nonetheless. Most humans would have cowered. Most humans haven't had their entire worldview shattered in the last 12 hours, Luna pointed out. I think I'm running on shock and spite at this point. That pulled a genuine laugh from Orpheus, warm and rich despite his cold nature. Spite is an excellent motivator. I've built an empire on it. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the city lights through the massive windows. Finally, Luna voiced the question that had been growing in her mind since the council's visit. What did that vampire mean about the bond evolving into something more complicated? Orpheus was quiet for so long, Luna thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of centuries. Blood bonds, when maintained and strengthened over time, can develop into mate bonds. It's rare, particularly between vampires and humans, but not unheard of. A mate bond is permanent and absolute, two souls intertwined on a fundamental level. It brings benefits: extended human lifespan, shared strength, perfect trust and understanding. But it also makes both parties vulnerable in ways that can be exploited. And you didn't know creating the blood bond might lead to that? I suspected it was possible, Orpheus admitted, but in that moment, with you dying in the snow, the risk seemed irrelevant compared to the certainty of your death. I'd make the same choice again, Luna. Every time. The honesty in his words, both spoken and felt through the bond, made Luna's heart ache. This ancient vampire, powerful enough to rule territory spanning thousands of miles, had risked potential vulnerability to save her life. A nobody. An accountant who'd never done anything remarkable in her entire 24 years. Thank you, she whispered, for saving me, for protecting me from the council, for all of it. Orpheus turned to look at her, red eyes glowing softly in the dim light. You don't need to thank me for doing what any decent being should do. But you did more than that. You stood against your own council, threatened war, invited me into your home and life. That's not obligation, Orpheus. That's choice. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. His fingers were cold but gentle. You're right. It is choice, and I find myself wanting to make many more choices involving you if you'll permit it. Luna's breath caught. The blood bond hummed between them, carrying emotions too complex to name attraction, certainly, but also curiosity, protectiveness, and something that felt like recognition, as if they'd been waiting to find each other. The council member said you've been alone for a long time, Luna said softly. Was that true? Orpheus's hand dropped away, but he didn't retreat. I've been Vampire King for 7 centuries. I have advisors, servants, subjects, enemies, and allies. But companions? Friends? Someone who sees me rather than my title and power? No, Luna. I haven't had that in longer than I care to remember. That sounds exhausting. It's necessary. Attachment creates vulnerability, and vulnerability can be exploited. I've watched too many powerful vampires fall because they loved someone their enemies could reach. But you attached yourself to me anyway, Luna pointed out, vulnerable or not. Perhaps I was tired of being invulnerable, Orpheus said so quietly she almost didn't hear. Or perhaps you were worth the risk. Before Luna could respond, her stomach growled loudly, breaking the tension. Orpheus smiled, that expression making him look younger and more approachable. You need food. Real food, not pastries and coffee. Come, I'll have Celeste prepare something substantial while I update you on the situation with your attackers. They moved to the penthouse's formal dining area, a space dominated by a table that could seat 20 but was currently set for 1 at the far end. Celeste appeared with a meal that smelled incredible roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and a wine Luna suspected cost more than her monthly rent. Did you find them? Luna asked as she ate, trying not to focus on how Orpheus watched her with those unsettling red eyes. The men who attacked me. We did. Something dark crossed Orpheus's features. 3 humans, all with prior assault charges that were dismissed due to insufficient evidence or intimidated witnesses. They've been terrorizing women in that district for months, but the police seemed remarkably uninterested in stopping them. Why? Because one of the attackers is the nephew of a city council member who's been paying to make problems disappear. Orpheus's fingers drummed against the table. That complicates matters. I can't simply kill them without causing political issues that would draw unwanted attention to the vampire community. Luna set down her fork, appetite suddenly gone. But you want to kill them? Yes? No hesitation, no apology. They hurt you, terrified you, nearly killed you, by vampire law that gives me absolute right to end their lives in any manner I choose. But vampire law doesn't supersede human law in most situations, particularly when it might expose our existence. So what will you do? Orpheus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I'll ensure they face consequences through human legal systems. Cassius is already compiling evidence of their previous attacks, evidence that's admissible in court and can't be dismissed. Simultaneously, I've arranged for certain financial irregularities involving the council member uncle to come to light. By tomorrow evening, all 3 attackers will be in custody facing charges that will put them away for decades. That seems fair, I guess. Luna wasn't sure how she felt about Orpheus orchestrating legal retribution on her behalf. Fair would be letting me drain them dry and leave their bodies as warnings, Orpheus corrected. This is compromise. They'll face justice, you'll be safe from retaliation, and the vampire community remains undetected. Though I confess, I'm not entirely satisfied with the solution. Because you wanted to kill them, Luna said, understanding. Through the bond, she felt his frustrated rage, the barely contained violence of a predator denied his prey. Because hurting you triggered instincts I've suppressed for centuries, Orpheus admitted. I've worked very hard to be civilized, Luna, to build cooperation between species, to move beyond the old ways of vampire dominance and human subjugation. But when I found you bleeding in that alley, I wanted nothing more than to hunt down every person involved and paint the city with their blood. That's not the enlightened leader I've tried to become. That's the ancient monster I'm always one bad decision away from being. Luna stood and walked around the table to where Orpheus sat. He tracked her movement with those glowing eyes, tense as if expecting rejection. Instead, she placed her hand over his where it rested on the table. His skin was cold beneath her palm, but she didn't pull away. You saved my life, she said firmly. You protected me from your own counsel. You're ensuring my attackers face justice through proper channels, despite every instinct pushing you toward violence. That's not a monster, Orpheus. That's someone fighting very hard to be good despite how easy it would be to be terrible. His fingers turned under hers, gripping her hand with surprising gentleness given his strength. You shouldn't trust me this easily. The blood bond won't let me lie to myself about who you are, Luna countered. I feel your emotions, remember? The rage is there, yes, but so is the restraint, the determination to protect me without becoming the villain. You're trying, Orpheus. That matters. They stayed like that for several heartbeats, connected by touch and bond, while something unspoken shifted between them. Finally, Orpheus stood, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. You should rest more. Tomorrow evening, Serafina will begin your education in vampire culture. It won't be optional. I'm afraid the council insisted, and it truly is necessary for your safety. Understanding our laws and customs will help you navigate situations that might otherwise be dangerous. Will you be there? Luna asked. Would you like me to be? The question felt loaded with meaning beyond simple scheduling. Luna considered lying, playing it safe, maintaining distance from this impossibly dangerous attraction growing between them. But the blood bond made deception pointless. Yes, she admitted, I'd like you to be there. Orpheus's expression softened in that way that made him look less like an ancient king and more like a man who'd been lonely too long. Then I'll be there. The next several weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Luna's nights became filled with education in a world she'd never known existed. Serafina proved an excellent teacher, patient but thorough, covering everything from vampire hierarchy and territorial laws to the complex relationships between vampires, werewolves, witches, and other supernatural species Luna had only ever encountered in fiction. She learned that vampires organized themselves into bloodlines and houses, with Orpheus holding authority over all Eastern America's territory as vampire king. She learned about blood laws that governed feeding, prohibited killing without cause, and established consequences for exposure of the supernatural world to unaware humans. She learned that vampire society valued strength, cunning, and honor in equal measure, that while they were predators, they maintained strict codes of conduct that had evolved over millennia. But more than the lessons themselves, Luna cherished the time spent with Orpheus. He attended most of her educational sessions, occasionally correcting or expanding on Serafina's teachings, offering his own 700-year perspective on vampire history and culture. In those hours, Luna began to see past the title and power to the person beneath. Orpheus was patient, answering even her most basic questions without condescension. He was surprisingly witty, his humor dry and often self-deprecating in ways that made Luna laugh unexpectedly. And he was genuinely curious about her, not just her adjustment to vampire knowledge, but her life before, her dreams, her relationship with her sister, the books she read, and music she loved. He told her about his own past, though the details seemed to pain him. He'd been turned during the Black Death in Europe, dying of plague and waking as something that could never die. He'd fought in wars, built empires, loved and lost people whose names were now forgotten by history. He'd been crowned Vampire King after defeating the previous ruler in single combat, and he'd spent the subsequent centuries trying to reform vampire society from within. Why? Luna asked one evening as they sat together in his private study, a room lined with books in dozens of languages. Why not just rule the old way if you had the power to enforce it? Orpheus gazed out the window at the sleeping city. Because the old ways were leading us toward extinction. Humans were becoming more numerous, more technologically advanced, harder to hide from. I foresaw a future where humanity would discover us and have the weapons to destroy us entirely. The only path to survival was cooperation, teaching vampires to coexist with humans rather than simply preying on them. Not all vampires agreed. Many still don't, he admitted. There are factions that consider me a traitor to our nature, that long for the nights when vampires were apex predators, accountable to no one. The Council, for all their politics and posturing, largely supports my vision, but there are others who would happily see me overthrown. Luna absorbed this, understanding now why the blood bond had caused such controversy. She represented a vulnerability, a human who could be used to hurt or manipulate the Vampire King. Yet Orpheus hadn't let that possibility stop him from saving her. During the days, while Orpheus slept the sleep of the undead, Luna found herself restless. She couldn't return to her old apartment, too exposed, too dangerous given the attention her connection to Orpheus had attracted. Instead, she remained in the spire, protected by security teams she rarely saw but knew constantly monitored the building. Celeste became an unexpected friend, another human navigating the supernatural world with pragmatism and humor. Over coffee one afternoon, while Orpheus lay dormant, Celeste shared her own story of coming to work for the Vampire King. "I was running from an abusive ex," Celeste explained, hands wrapped around her mug. "Orpheus found me hiding in the basement of one of his properties, terrified and half-starved. He could have had me removed, but instead, he offered me a job. Said he needed someone who understood human needs to manage his household. That was 12 years ago. Best decision I ever made." "You're not afraid of him?" Luna asked. "Terrified sometimes," Celeste admitted cheerfully. "He's ancient and powerful and could kill me with a thought, but he won't. Orpheus is dangerous, Luna, but only to people who threaten what he protects. If you're loyal to him, he'll move mountains to keep you safe." Luna thought about that often over the following weeks. She thought about it when Orpheus appeared one evening with a new laptop to replace the one she'd lost, already loaded with secure access to Obsidian Enterprises systems so she could work remotely. She thought about it when he arranged for her sister's university tuition to be paid in full for the remaining 2 years, presented as a company scholarship that couldn't be traced back to him personally. She thought about it during quiet evenings when he'd sit beside her in companionable silence, both reading, simply enjoying each other's presence. The blood bond grew stronger with each passing day, fed by proximity and the periodic reinforcement Orpheus had mentioned. Once a week he would offer his wrist and Luna would accept a small amount of his blood to maintain the connection. The ritual had become almost intimate, performed in the privacy of his study, with Orpheus watching her carefully for any signs of discomfort. "Does it bother you?" he asked one evening after the reinforcement. "Taking my blood?" Luna considered the question honestly. "It should, I think. It should feel wrong or disturbing, but it doesn't. It feels natural, like something my body recognizes as necessary. That's the bond adjusting your perception," Orpheus explained, making the act acceptable to both participants so the connection can be maintained. If you ever want to stop Luna, if you ever want the bond dissolved, there are ways. Difficult ways, but possible. Do you want that? Luna asked instead of answering. No. Simple, direct, absolutely certain. I've become quite attached to having you in my life, Luna Prescott. Luna's heart did something complicated in her chest. Over the past month, her feelings for Orpheus had evolved far beyond gratitude or simple attraction. She found herself watching for his appearance each evening, her entire mood lifting when he entered a room. She treasured the rare smiles he offered her, the moments when his careful control slipped, and she glimpsed the person beneath the ancient vampire king. She'd caught herself daydreaming about what it would be like to close the careful distance he maintained between them, to see if his lips were as cold as his hands. She was falling in love with him, Luna realized with startling clarity. Falling in love with a 700-year-old vampire who'd saved her life and somehow become the center of her world in a matter of weeks. The terrifying part was that through the blood bond, she suspected he knew, suspected he felt her growing affection every time she looked at him. Yet he'd said nothing, maintained his respectful distance, never pushed for more than she seemed ready to give. "Orpheus," Luna said softly, making a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "What did the council member mean about the bond evolving? You explained the basic concept, but not the specifics." Orpheus went very still, the supernatural stillness of a vampire focusing completely on potential danger. "Why do you ask?" "Because I can feel the bond changing," Luna admitted. "It's getting stronger, deeper. Sometimes I swear I can sense you even during the day when you're sleeping, and sometimes I'll feel these flashes of emotion from you that seem almost like—" She trailed off, courage failing. "Like what?" Orpheus prompted, voice carefully neutral, though his eyes glowed brighter. "Like you're interested in me as more than just someone you saved," Luna finished in a rush. "But you've never said anything or done anything, and I don't know if I'm imagining it through the bond or if it's real, and I'm sorry if this is completely inappropriate given everything, but I needed to." Orpheus crossed the space between them with impossible speed, stopping inches away without touching her. This close, Luna could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides as if fighting the urge to reach for her. "You're not imagining it," he said, voice rough with suppressed emotion. "The bond is evolving toward something permanent because my feelings for you extend far beyond gratitude or responsibility. But Luna, you must understand, I'm ancient and dangerous and have countless enemies. If we allow this bond to complete, if we acknowledge what's growing between us, you'll be bound to me in ways that can never be undone. You'll be marking yourself as the Vampire King's weakness, the one point where I can be hurt. I won't push you toward that future unless you're absolutely certain." Luna reached up, placing her palm against his cold cheek. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered. "I know it's fast and probably foolish and definitely complicated, but it's true. The bond didn't create these feelings, Orpheus. It just helped me recognize them." His eyes closed briefly, and through the bond, Luna felt the surge of his emotions, joy and fear and desire and protectiveness, all tangled together. When he opened his eyes again, the red glow had intensified. "I have lived 700 years, Orpheus said quietly. "I have known countless people, loved a few, lost even fewer. But Luna Prescott, in the 6 weeks since I found you dying in the snow, you have become essential to me in ways I can't fully articulate. I think about you constantly. I plan my evenings around seeing you. The thought of you in danger makes me capable of acts that would horrify you. If that's not love, it's something close enough to be indistinguishable from it." "Then why have you been keeping your distance?" Luna asked. "Because I wanted you to choose freely, without pressure from the bond or gratitude or fear. I wanted you to know me truly, know me, both the man I try to be and the monster I sometimes am. And I wanted to be absolutely certain that I could keep you safe before claiming you as mine. And now?" Luna's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Now I'm reasonably confident I can protect you from external threats," Orpheus said, the corner of his mouth quirking up. Internal threats, the danger I represent to your peace and mortality and normal human life, those remain concerning. But if you're willing to risk it, Luna, then I find I'm selfish enough to stop fighting what we both feel." In answer, Luna pushed up onto her toes and kissed him. For a split second, Orpheus remained frozen with surprise. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him as he returned the kiss with an intensity that stole her breath. His lips were cool against hers, his body cold but solid, and Luna had never felt safer or more alive than in that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Luna was breathing hard, while Orpheus appeared mostly affected, he rested his forehead against hers. "The bond will complete within days now," he murmured. "Acknowledging our feelings accelerates the process. Are you certain, Luna? Certain you want to bind yourself to me permanently?" "More certain than I've been about anything," Luna assured him. Orpheus kissed her again, gentler this time, with a reverence that made tears prick at her eyes. When he pulled back, he was smiling, truly smiling, not the careful expressions he usually wore, but something open and genuine and devastatingly beautiful. "Then I suppose I should do this properly," he said, and to Luna's shock, he knelt before her, taking her hand in both of his. "Luna Prescott, would you consent to complete the mate bond with me? To bind your life to mine, accepting both the protection and the danger that comes with being connected to the Vampire King? I promise to cherish you, protect you, and love you for as long as you draw breath and beyond if possible. I promise to respect your humanity, your choices, and your autonomy even as we become intertwined on a fundamental level. And I promise that harming you will remain the one act guaranteed to unleash the full extent of my ancient power without restraint or mercy." Luna laughed through sudden tears. That might be the most romantic and terrifying proposal anyone's ever received. "Is that a yes?" "Yes, you dramatic vampire. Yes to all of it." Orpheus stood in one fluid motion, lifting Luna off her feet and spinning her with uncharacteristic exuberance. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck, marveling at this glimpse of the man beneath the centuries of control and responsibility. The following weeks brought changes Luna hadn't anticipated. The mate bond, once fully established, proved far more intense than the blood bond had been. She could sense Orpheus's location at all times now, feel his emotional state with perfect clarity, even communicate basic thoughts and feelings without words when they concentrated. The connection went both ways. Orpheus could find her anywhere, sense if she was in distress, and according to Serafina, would be able to share his strength with her in life-threatening situations. More surprisingly, Luna found her own senses continuing to sharpen, her reflexes improving beyond normal human capacity. She wasn't becoming a vampire, her heart still beat, she still needed food and sleep, still cast a reflection. But the mate bond granted her certain protections and enhancements that made her something more than entirely human. "It's the blood," Orpheus explained one evening, as Luna successfully caught a glass she'd knocked off the table with reactions she definitely hadn't possessed a month ago. "My blood, renewed weekly through the bond maintenance, is gradually reinforcing your human physiology. You'll never be as strong or fast as a vampire, but you'll exceed normal human limitations. And your lifespan will extend significantly. Humans bonded to vampires often live 2 or 3 times the normal span while maintaining their youth and health." "So I could potentially live into my 200s?" Luna asked, trying to wrap her mind around the concept. "Possibly longer if we're fortunate. The oldest recorded human mate lived to 247 years before dying peacefully in her sleep." Luna thought about all the time that represented decades to learn everything she wanted to know, to see places she'd only dreamed of visiting, to build a life beside someone who'd already lived through centuries of history. "That's a long time to be together," she said carefully. "Are you sure you won't get bored of me after a century or two?" Orpheus pulled her against him, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. "I spent 700 years alone before meeting you, Luna. I assure you boredom is not a concern." They stood like that often now, comfortable in each other's space, the careful distance Orpheus had maintained dissolved by their completed bond. Luna had moved from the guest suite to his private chambers, a move that scandalized several council members and delighted others depending on their political leanings regarding the Vampire King's personal life. Their relationship, while deeply emotional and romantic, had remained chaste beyond kissing. Orpheus insisted on taking things slowly, concerned about his strength and the predatory instincts that sometimes surfaced when they were intimate. Luna appreciated his restraint, even as she longed to move their connection forward physically, but she trusted his judgment about his own control and was content to let things develop naturally. 2 months after the attack that had changed her life, Luna finally returned to Obsidian Enterprises, not to the 37th floor accounting department, but to the executive levels where Orpheus conducted his business. The council had insisted that her official position be updated to reflect her status as the Vampire King's mate, though exactly what that position should be had sparked considerable debate. In the end, Luna herself had suggested a solution. She would serve as human affairs liaison, working with the human employees to address concerns and facilitate communication between human and vampire staff. It was a newly created position, but one that filled a genuine need as Orpheus's integration policies expanded. Are you certain you want to work?" Orpheus had asked when she'd proposed the idea. "You're under no obligation to maintain employment. As my mate, you'll have access to resources that would allow you to pursue any interest." "I need to work," Luna had explained. "I need to feel useful and engaged. Plus, it seems like I'm uniquely positioned to help bridge the gap between human and vampire employees. Let me do this, Orpheus." He'd agreed, though she suspected he would have agreed to almost anything she asked for at that point. The Vampire King, Luna was learning, was absolutely hopeless when it came to denying his mate's wishes. Her first day in the new position proved both illuminating and challenging. Many human employees had heard rumors about Luna's connection to the mysterious owner, and reactions ranged from curiosity to resentment to fear. Luna met with department heads throughout the evening. Obsidian Enterprises operated on a shifted schedule, with most activities occurring between sunset and sunrise to accommodate vampire leadership. By midnight, Luna was exhausted but satisfied with the initial progress. She'd identified several legitimate concerns from human staff about unclear protocols when working with vampire supervisors, inconsistent enforcement of workplace policies, and a general lack of understanding about vampire culture that sometimes led to accidental offense. She was writing up her notes in the office adjacent to Orpheus's when his door burst open with enough force to crack the frame. Luna jumped, nearly knocking over her coffee, as a vampire she'd never seen before stalked into the room. This vampire was old. Luna could sense it in the weight of his presence, the way the air seemed to thicken around him. He had the typical white hair and pale skin of his kind, but his features were sharp to the point of cruelty, and his red eyes held no warmth whatsoever. "Where is he?" the vampire demanded, ignoring Luna entirely as he surveyed Orpheus's empty office. "Vampire King Orpheus is in a council meeting," Luna said, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "If you'd like to schedule an appointment." The vampire's attention snapped to her, and Luna understood immediately that she was in danger. His gaze raked over her with contempt and something darker, more predatory. "The human mate," he said, lips pulling back to reveal his fangs. "How convenient. I'd planned to hunt you down eventually, but here you are, delivered like a gift." Luna's hand moved to the emergency alert button Orpheus had installed beneath her desk, a direct link to his personal security and to him through their bond. She pressed it while keeping her expression neutral. "I don't believe we've been introduced," Luna said, buying time. Through the mate bond, she felt Orpheus's sudden spike of alarm and fury as he sensed her fear. "I am Draven Nightshade, and I should have been Vampire King," the vampire said, moving closer with predatory grace. "I should have won that challenge 700 years ago, but Orpheus cheated, used tricks and politics to claim victory. He's been too strong to challenge directly, so I've waited, planned, and now he's finally given me the weakness I need." Luna understood then this vampire meant to kill her, to hurt Orpheus, to use her as the weapon against the Vampire King that the council had warned about. Her mind raced through everything she'd learned about vampire combat and politics over the past months. She couldn't fight Draven physically, he was ancient and powerful, and even her bond-enhanced abilities wouldn't be enough. But she could use what she knew about vampire law. "Poof, if you kill me, you'll break blood law," Luna said firmly. "I'm under the Vampire King's protection, marked as his mate. Harming me without challenge or cause is forbidden." "Only if there are witnesses," Draven countered with a cold smile. "Your security systems won't record me, I've seen to that. And by the time Orpheus arrives, I'll be long gone, leaving him to find your broken body as evidence of his failure to protect what he loves." The door to Luna's office exploded inward, torn completely off its hinges. Orpheus stood in the ruined doorway, and Luna had never seen him look so terrifying. His eyes glowed like burning coals, his fangs fully extended, and power radiated from him in waves that made the lights flicker and dim. He looked every inch the ancient apex predator, the vampire king who'd ruled for 7 centuries through strength and cunning. "Step away from her," Orpheus said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute command. "Step away now, Draven, or I will end you where you stand." Draven laughed, but Luna could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. Whatever he'd planned, he clearly hadn't expected Orpheus to arrive so quickly. "You're too civilized now," Draven taunted, though he did move slightly away from Luna, "too concerned with laws and politics and maintaining your precious human cooperation. You won't kill me without council approval." Orpheus moved with speed Luna's eyes couldn't track. One moment he stood in the doorway, the next he had Draven pinned against the wall by his throat, lifting the older vampire off his feet with one hand. "I am the vampire king," Orpheus said with deadly calm. "I make the laws and I enforce them. You threatened my mate with full knowledge of her protected status. You violated my territory with hostile intent, and you just confessed to both crimes in front of witnesses." He nodded toward the doorway, where several other vampires now stood, council members, Luna realized, who must have been in the meeting with Orpheus. The thin council member Luna remembered from their first encounter stepped forward. "We heard his confession. We witnessed his attack. By ancient law and modern protocol, Vampire King Orpheus has the right to exact immediate punishment." Draven struggled against Orpheus's grip, but the Vampire King's hold didn't budge. "You can't kill me for this. I didn't actually harm her." "You intended to," Orpheus interrupted. "You planned it, bragged about it, and would have succeeded if not for the mate bond allowing me to sense her distress instantly. Intent matters under blood law, Draven. You should have remembered that." Luna expected violence, then expected Orpheus to tear Draven apart with his bare hands, to paint the office with blood and vengeance. Instead, Orpheus took a deep breath, and Luna felt him fighting for control through their bond. "However," Orpheus continued, voice still tight with barely suppressed rage, "I have spent centuries trying to move beyond simple violence as the solution to every problem. So I offer you a choice, Draven. Accept immediate exile from the Eastern Americas, your bloodline stripped of territory and title, never to return under penalty of death, or face me in formal challenge for attempting to harm my mate." "That's not a choice," Draven spat. "Exile is death to someone of my age and power, and formal challenge against you is suicide." "Then you should have thought more carefully before threatening what belongs to me," Orpheus said coldly. He released Draven, who collapsed to the floor. "You have until sunrise to leave my territory. If you're still within the Eastern Americas when the sun rises tomorrow, I will hunt you myself, and your death will not be quick. Council members, please witness his departure and report back to me." The female council member nodded, gesturing for Draven to stand. "Come, be grateful the Vampire King is showing mercy you don't deserve." They left, taking the defeated vampire with them. Only then did Orpheus turn to Luna, the rage in his expression transforming instantly to concern. He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with enough force to lift her off her feet. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, hands running over her as if checking for injuries. "Did he touch you? Harm you in any way?" "I'm fine," Luna assured him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Scared, but fine. I felt you coming through. The bond knew you'd arrive in time." Orpheus buried his face in her hair, and Luna felt him trembling with the aftermath of his rage. "When I felt your fear through the bond, when I realized someone was threatening you in my own building, I lost all control. If the council members hadn't been with me, I would have torn him apart without hesitation or trial. You make me want to abandon centuries of civilization, Luna. You make me want to become the monster again, if that's what it takes to keep you safe." "But you didn't," Luna said softly. "You offered him a choice within the law, even though every instinct probably screamed for his blood. That's not a monster, Orpheus. That's a king ruling with justice despite personal fury." He pulled back enough to look at her, and Luna saw moisture in his eyes that might have been tears if vampires could cry. I cannot lose you. The mate bond has made you essential to my existence in ways that terrify me. If Draven had succeeded, if I'd arrived seconds later— You didn't, Luna interrupted firmly. The bond worked perfectly. I pressed the alert, you felt my distress, and you arrived in time. The system protected me exactly as you designed it to. Orpheus kissed her then, desperately and deeply, and Luna tasted his fear and relief and overwhelming love through the mate bond. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm moving you to the Spire permanently, he said. No more working in the main building where any vampire can access you. You'll conduct your human affairs liaison duties remotely, with scheduled meetings in secured locations. Luna started to protest, then saw the genuine terror still lingering in his eyes. This wasn't about control or overprotection. This was about a 700-year-old vampire who'd finally found someone he loved confronting the reality of her mortality and vulnerability. Okay, she agreed quietly. We'll adjust the security protocols in my work location. But Orpheus, we can't live in constant fear. There will always be threats, always be vampires who see me as your weakness. We have to find a balance between safety and actually living our lives. I know, Orpheus admitted, but tonight is not the night for balance. Tonight, I need to hold you and reassure myself that you're safe and alive and mine. They returned to the Spire together, and for the first time, Luna felt the full weight of what being the Vampire King's mate meant. She was a target now, a living vulnerability that Orpheus's enemies would always seek to exploit. But looking at the male beside her, feeling his unwavering love and protectiveness through their bond, Luna couldn't regret the path that had led her here. The next several months passed with gradually decreasing drama as the supernatural community adjusted to the reality of the Vampire King's human mate. Luna settled into her role as human affairs liaison, working from the Spire, but maintaining regular contact with Obsidian Enterprises employees through video conferences and carefully arranged meetings. Her initiatives to bridge the gap between human and vampire staff proved successful, and complaints about workplace tensions decreased significantly. More importantly, Luna and Orpheus grew deeper in their relationship. The mate bond strengthened with each passing week, weaving them together until Luna could barely remember a time when she hadn't been able to sense his presence like a constant warmth beneath her heart. Orpheus's initial caution about physical intimacy gradually gave way to trust in his own control, and their relationship evolved into something that satisfied them both emotionally and physically. Luna learned to navigate vampire politics with Orpheus's patient guidance, attending council meetings as his official mate and occasionally offering the human perspective that his vampire advisors lacked. She learned to distinguish between genuine threats and political posturing, to understand the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed vampire society, to carry herself with the dignity expected of the Vampire King's chosen partner. But beyond the politics and danger and supernatural complexities, Luna simply enjoyed being with Orpheus. They spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing, sharing their vastly different life experiences. He told her stories about historical events he'd witnessed firsthand, while she shared modern perspectives and helped him understand the rapidly changing world. They watched movies together, Luna laughing at Orpheus's commentary on how inaccurately vampires were portrayed. They read books side by side in comfortable silence. They cooked together, or rather, Luna cooked while Orpheus watched and asked surprisingly insightful questions about human food preparation, despite no longer eating. I miss it sometimes, he admitted one evening while Luna prepared dinner. Not the necessity of food, but the social aspect. Breaking bread with friends, lingering over a meal, the rituals of human dining. Vampires have our own rituals around blood sharing, but it's not quite the same. Luna looked up from chopping vegetables. What do you miss most? Like if you could eat one more meal, what would it be? Orpheus considered the question seriously. Fresh bread, he said finally. Still warm from the oven, with butter melting into it. That was my favorite thing before I turned my mother-made bread every morning, and the smell of it baking would wake the entire household. I'd sneak pieces while it was still too hot to handle properly and burn my fingers. I can't remember her face anymore, Luna. 700 years is too long to hold on to mortal memories, but I still remember how that bread tasted. Luna set down her knife and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. I'm sorry you lost that. Lost all of it, your family, your mortal life, your simple pleasures like warm bread. Orpheus returned the embrace, resting his chin on top of her head. I would have lost it regardless. Humans die, Luna. If I hadn't been turned, I would have lived maybe 40 years in that medieval village before disease or violence or simple age took me. Instead, I've had centuries to explore the world, build something meaningful, and eventually find you. I can't regret the path that led me here. Spring arrived, bringing warmer weather, and the 6-month anniversary of the night Orpheus had found Luna bleeding in the snow. They marked the occasion with a private ceremony in the spire, not a wedding exactly, since vampire customs didn't quite translate to human marriage traditions, but a formal acknowledgement of their completed mate bond in front of the council and Luna's sister, Emma, who had been told enough truth to understand what her older sister had become. Emma, initially terrified by the revelation of vampire's existence, had gradually warmed to Orpheus after seeing how he treated Luna. The university student had even joked that having the Vampire King as a future brother-in-law would definitely make for interesting family dinners. Though I draw the line at becoming a vampire myself, Emma had declared firmly, one supernatural family member is quite enough, thank you. As Luna stood beside Orpheus in a gown of deep burgundy silk, exchanging formal vows in English and the ancient vampire language he'd taught her phonetically, she reflected on the impossibility of her current life. 6 months ago, she'd been a nobody accountant worried about expense reports and rent payments. Now, she was the Vampire King's mate, respected in supernatural circles, protected by ancient laws, bound to a man who'd lived through centuries of history and chosen her above all others. The ceremony concluded with Orpheus offering his wrist in the ritual blood exchange that renewed their bond. Luna accepted without hesitation, the taste of his blood familiar now, a communion that sealed them together once more. When she offered her own wrist in return, a reciprocation Orpheus only took in smallest measure, enough for symbolism without causing her harm, the mate bond flared bright and warm between them, acknowledged and witnessed by everyone present. It is done, the thin council member declared. Luna Prescott is recognized as true mate to Vampire King Orpheus Obsidian, protected under ancient law, honored as our queen's companion, bound until final death parts them. Let all supernatural citizens witness and acknowledge this union. Applause echoed through the spire, and Luna found herself crying happy tears as Orpheus pulled her into his arms and kissed her, while their assembled witnesses cheered. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, Luna noticed Orpheus's eyes held that moisture that might have been tears if his biology allowed it. I love you, he murmured against her temple. I loved you when I found you dying in the snow, though I didn't recognize it yet. I loved you when you faced down the council with nothing but courage and spite. I loved you when you chose to bind yourself to me, despite knowing the danger. And I'll love you until the stars burn out and beyond, if such a thing is possible. I love you too, Luna whispered back. My king, my mate, my Orpheus. The celebration continued long into the night, but eventually, Luna and Orpheus retreated to their private chambers, leaving their guests to the capable supervision of Celeste and the household staff. In the quiet intimacy of their suite, with the city lights glittering below and the mate bond humming contentedly between them, they simply held each other. Are you happy? Orpheus asked eventually, his cold fingers tracing idle patterns on Luna's arm. Luna considered the question seriously. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined, bringing danger and complexity and constant adjustment to supernatural realities. She'd lost her simple anonymity, gained enemies she'd never wanted, and bound herself to a future that stretched centuries beyond normal human span. But she'd also found love more profound than she'd believed possible. She'd discovered purpose in her work, bridging human and vampire communities. She'd gained family in Celeste and the household staff, gained allies and sympathetic council members, gained a partner who valued her thoughts and respected her choices, despite having the power to simply command obedience. "Yes," Luna said finally, tilting her head up to meet those glowing red eyes. "I'm incredibly happy. Are you?" Orpheus smiled, that devastating expression that transformed his ancient, regal features into something warm and genuine and entirely focused on her. "More than I've been in 700 years, he admitted. "You've given me something I'd stopped believing I could have, Luna. Not just companionship or affection, but genuine partnership with someone who sees me as a person rather than just a title. Someone who's brave enough to argue with me when she thinks I'm wrong, soft enough to comfort me after nightmares about losing her, and strong enough to stand beside me through whatever challenges we face. So yes, my love, I'm far happier than I deserve to be." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, the mate bond glowing warm and bright between them. Luna's last conscious thought was gratitude for the storm that had brought her into Orpheus's path, for his decision to save her despite the complications, for the love that had grown between them against all logic and expectation. 2 weeks after their bonding ceremony, Orpheus burst into their chambers with uncharacteristic urgency, waking Luna from an afternoon nap. She bolted upright, immediately alert for danger, but his expression held excitement rather than alarm. "What is it?" Luna asked, pushing tangled hair from her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Orpheus assured her quickly. "But something is very, very right. Come with me. There's someone I want you to meet." Curious and slightly concerned, Luna followed him through the spire to a private meeting room she hadn't known existed. Inside stood an ancient vampire even older than Orpheus, if Luna was reading The Weight of Power correctly. This vampire's white hair fell to his waist, and his red eyes held the depth of millennia rather than centuries. "Luna," Orpheus said, barely contained joy vibrating through both his voice and their bond. "This is Alaric Moonborn. He was my maker, the vampire who turned me 700 years ago. I haven't seen him in over 4 centuries. Luna's eyes widened. She knew Orpheus had been trying to locate his maker for decades, hoping to reconnect with the one being who understood his earliest years of vampirism. The search had proven fruitless until now. "My Lord Alaric," Luna said with a respectful bow, using the formal address Seraphina had taught her. "It's an honor to meet you." Alaric laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. "None of that formal nonsense, child. If you're important enough for my boy to mate bond with, you're family." He moved closer, studying Luna with clear interest. "A human mate. I never thought I'd see Orpheus take that risk, but I understand it now. You've got strength in you, girl. The kind that doesn't come from muscles or magic, but from sheer stubborn will to survive." "Thank you," Luna said, unsure if that was a compliment. "It's the highest compliment I can offer," Alaric assured her. He turned to Orpheus, expression sobering. "I heard rumors about the Vampire King's human mate and came to see for myself. Also to apologize for disappearing 400 years ago without explanation. I was hunting someone who'd wronged me, and the pursuit took me far from the Americas. I should have contacted you, boy. Should have let you know I was well." "You're here now," Orpheus said simply, though Luna felt his deep relief through their bond. "Will you stay? The spire has ample room, and I'd appreciate your counsel on several territorial matters." "I'd be honored to stay for a time," Alaric agreed. He looked between Orpheus and Luna, smiling. "Besides, I want to get to know this brave human who managed to capture my boy's ancient, jaded heart. That's no small accomplishment." Alaric's presence brought unexpected joy to the spire. The ancient vampire had endless stories about Orpheus's early years, sharing embarrassing tales of his maker's mistakes and triumphs with obvious affection. Luna learned that Orpheus had been a plague doctor before his turning, trying desperately to save his dying village despite knowing the effort was futile. Alaric had turned him out of respect for that selfless dedication, seeing potential for a different kind of healer, one who could navigate the political plagues that infected vampire society. He was always trying to fix things, Alaric told Luna over tea one evening while Orpheus attended council business. Even as a new vampire barely able to control his thirst, he was drawing up plans for reform. Drove me mad with his insistence that vampires could be better than simple predators. But he was right in the end. Look at what he's built, an empire based on cooperation rather than fear. Did you ever regret turning him? Luna asked. Alaric shook his head firmly. Never. Orpheus is perhaps the finest vampire I've ever known, and I've known thousands over my long existence. He has the strength to lead and the wisdom to rule with justice. And now he has you to remind him that power means nothing without compassion. Luna blushed at the praise, but accepted it graciously. In the weeks since Alaric's arrival, she'd grown fond of the ancient vampire, appreciating his wit and wisdom, the way he treated her as family rather than just Orpheus's mate. But all good things seemed to attract complications in Luna's new life. 3 weeks after Alaric's arrival, the spire's security systems went dark, simultaneously, every camera, every alarm, every ward failing at once. Orpheus reacted instantly, gathering Luna and ordering Alaric to protect her while he investigated. This isn't random malfunction, Orpheus said grimly, power already gathering around him. Someone's attacking the spire directly. They're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. It proved to be both. The attackers were a group of rogue vampires who'd apparently decided the Vampire King had grown too attached to his human mate, too distracted to properly lead. They'd allied with several werewolf packs who resented Orpheus's territorial agreements, forming a coalition aimed at overthrowing his rule. The battle that followed was brief, but intense. Orpheus fought with the full power of 7 centuries of experience, his fury at the threat to his home and mate unleashing the ancient warrior he usually kept buried beneath civilized leadership. Alaric joined him, fighting with skills that predated recorded history. Even the council members, roused by the attack, appeared to defend their king and his territory. Luna watched from the secure panic room Orpheus had installed months ago, seeing through security feeds that hadn't been compromised. She witnessed her mate move with lethal grace, dispatching enemies with efficiency born from centuries of combat. She saw him protect his home with the same dedication he protected her absolutely, without mercy for those who threatened what he loved. The attackers were defeated within an hour, survivors fleeing into the night or surrendering to face judgment. When Orpheus finally appeared at the panic room door, covered in blood that wasn't his own, Luna threw herself into his arms despite the mess. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, checking him for injuries, even though the blood covering him suggested he'd done far more damage than he'd received. "I'm fine," Orpheus assured her, holding her carefully to avoid staining her clothes. "The attackers have been dealt with, some dead, some imprisoned, all defeated. You're safe, Luna. Our home is secure again." Luna looked up at him, seeing both the ancient warrior and the man she loved in his weary expression. "I'm sorry they attacked because of me. If I wasn't here, if you weren't here, I would be far less than I am," Orpheus interrupted firmly. "You didn't cause this attack, Luna. Vampires who resent my leadership and reforms caused it. They would have found some excuse to challenge me eventually, mate bond or not. At least this way, we've flushed them out and dealt with the threat decisively." The council convened an emergency session that evening, with Alaric attending as honored witness. The gathered vampires discussed the attack, the implications of the coalition between rogue vampires and werewolves, and the punishments for survivors who'd participated. But they also acknowledged something else, that Orpheus had defended his territory and mate with a ferocity that reminded everyone why he'd held the title of Vampire King for 7 centuries. The attack had tested his strength, and he'd emerged victorious without question. Any remaining doubts about whether his bond to Luna weakened him were decisively laid to rest. "If anything," the female council member observed, "the mate bond seems to have strengthened you, Orpheus. I've never seen you fight with such focused rage. Your enemies should be grateful you're bonded at least. Now you have something to fight for beyond duty and obligation." In the aftermath, Orpheus instituted new security protocols throughout the Spire and all Obsidian Enterprises properties. He strengthened alliances with the werewolf packs who'd remained loyal, making clear that further betrayals would not be tolerated. And he spent several evenings reassuring Luna that she wasn't responsible for the violence, that he chose her knowing the challenges that came with having a human mate, and that he'd defend that choice against any threat. "You realize we're probably going to face more attempts like this," Luna said one evening as they stood together watching the sunset. Or rather, Luna watched while Orpheus stood carefully in the shadows, unable to tolerate even the last rays of dying sunlight. "People who see me as your weakness, our bond as an opportunity to hurt you." "I know," Orpheus acknowledged, "and each time I'll demonstrate that you're not my weakness, but my strength. That harming you doesn't make me vulnerable. It unleashes every ounce of power and violence I'm capable of wielding. Eventually, my enemies will learn." "And if they don't?" Orpheus pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they both watched the sun disappear below the horizon. "Then I'll keep teaching the lesson until there are no enemies left foolish enough to threaten what's mine." Luna leaned back into his cold embrace, feeling completely safe despite the dangers that surrounded them. The mate bond pulsed warm and steady, connecting them on levels that transcended physical protection. Whatever threats came their way, they would face them together, the vampire king and his human mate, bound by love and blood and choice. Summer gave way to fall, bringing cooler weather and the approach of Luna's first full year as Orpheus's mate. They marked each month with small private celebrations, acknowledging the improbable journey that had led them from that snowy alley to building a life together. Luna's work as human affairs liaison continued to expand, her initiatives earning recognition not just within Obsidian Enterprises, but throughout the supernatural community. Other vampire leaders began consulting her about improving their own human-vampire workplace relations, which amused Orpheus endlessly. "My mate, the diplomat," he'd teased when a West Coast vampire lord had requested her advice on employee retention. "Perhaps I should officially make you my ambassador to the human world." "You just want to find more excuses to brag about my accomplishments," Luna had retorted, though she'd been pleased by the recognition. Emma visited regularly now, having overcome her initial wariness of the vampire world. She and Orpheus had developed an unlikely friendship, bonding over their mutual protectiveness of Luna and their shared terrible sense of humor. Luna would often find them conspiring together, usually planning some surprise for her or trading embarrassing stories about her past. "You're supposed to be on my side," Luna complained to her sister after one such plotting session. "I'm always on your side," Emma assured her, "but I'm also making sure your ancient vampire boyfriend knows all your embarrassing childhood moments. It's my job as your little sister." Alaric remained at the spire, having apparently decided that staying near his creation and Luna was preferable to wandering alone after centuries of solitude. His presence brought balance to Orpheus's life, providing both the comfort of familiar connection and the wisdom that came with true ancient age. The elder vampire doted on Luna, treating her with the affection of a grandfather, despite being capable of tearing apart anyone who threatened her. As the anniversary of Luna's attack approached, Orpheus grew increasingly protective. The date held significance for him, marking both the worst and best night of his long existence, the night he'd nearly lost Luna before truly knowing her, and the night he'd forged the connection that eventually brought them together. "I want to take you somewhere," he said 3 days before the anniversary. "Somewhere I've never shown anyone else, not even Alaric. Will you trust me?" "Always," Luna answered without hesitation. That evening, Orpheus took her down through the spire's underground levels, past the parking structures and maintenance areas, to passages that seemed carved from living rock. They walked for nearly 20 minutes through tunnels lit only by Orpheus's preternatural vision and Luna's enhanced sight, until finally emerging into a vast cavern that stole Luna's breath. The space had been transformed into something between a cathedral and a garden. Bioluminescent plants Luna didn't recognize provided soft blue-green light, casting everything in an ethereal glow. A stream ran through the center, its water crystal clear despite flowing through deep underground. And everywhere covering the walls, hanging from the ceiling, growing in carefully tended beds, were flowers. Hundreds of different species, creating a riot of color and life in the heart of the earth. "What is this place?" Luna breathed, turning slowly to take in the impossible beauty. "My sanctuary," Orpheus admitted quietly. "I created it centuries ago when the weight of rule became too heavy. Vampires don't often admit to weakness, but we feel it nonetheless. When I needed to remember beauty, needed to recall that there were things worth protecting beyond power and territory, I'd come here." Luna walked through the garden, trailing her fingers across flower petals, marveling at the diversity of species. "These are from all over the world." "Everywhere I've traveled," Orpheus confirmed. "Each one represents a place I've been, a time I've lived through, a moment that mattered enough to preserve. This purple iris is from the gardens of Versailles before the Revolution. That white rose is descended from a cutting I took in England during the medieval period. The orchids are from a rainforest that no longer exists, their species preserved only here. It's beautiful, Luna said, tears pricking at her eyes. Thank you for showing me. Orpheus moved to stand beside her near the stream. I want you to add to it, to plant something here that represents our time together, so that centuries from now I can look at it and remember this era as the one where I finally stopped being alone. Luna turned to face him fully, seeing vulnerability in his expression that he rarely showed even to her. 700 years of existence, and he was offering to share his most private sanctuary, to invite her permanence into the one place that had been entirely his own. I'd be honored, Luna whispered. They spent the next hour selecting a spot and planting a sapling Orpheus had apparently prepared in advance, a cherry tree that would eventually provide both beauty and shade to the underground garden. As they worked together, hands in the dark earth, the mate bond glowed warm between them, celebrating this new commitment. When the tree was planted and watered, Orpheus pulled Luna close and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I love you, Luna Prescott. I will love you until this tree has grown ancient and died, and its descendants have done the same, and the world has turned so many times that even my vampire memory can't track the years. I will love you beyond death, if such a thing is possible, and beyond the ending of love itself. That's the most dramatic declaration I've ever heard, Luna said through happy tears. I love you too, Orpheus Obsidian, for however long I have, mortal or extended or anything in between. You're mine, as completely as I'm yours. They made love there in the garden among the flowers from 1,000 years and 100 nations, the bioluminescent plants casting their skin in shades of blue and green. And when they finally returned to the spire hours later, Luna felt a completion she'd never known before, as if every moment of her life had been leading to this person, this love, this impossibly perfect partnership. The anniversary itself passed quietly. Luna woke in Orpheus's arms as evening fell, feeling him stir as his supernatural biology roused him from day sleep. For several minutes, they simply held each other in silence, both remembering the night that had changed everything. What would you have done if I had died? Luna asked softly. If you'd arrived 30 seconds later? Orpheus was quiet for a long moment before answering. I don't know. Perhaps continued ruling, executing my duties with the same dedication but without joy. Perhaps step down, let someone else take the burden of leadership. Or perhaps I would have burned the city down in rage at the unfairness of fate, bringing you into my awareness only to rip you away before I could know you. I'm grateful I never had to find out. Me too, Luna said simply. That evening they hosted an intimate dinner at the Spire, intimate by vampire standards, meaning only about 30 guests including the council, Alaric, Emma, Celeste, and several human and vampire friends they'd made over the past year. It wasn't a celebration of the attack itself, but rather an acknowledgement of survival, of the love that had grown from trauma, of building something beautiful from terrifying circumstances. Speeches were made, toasts offered in both blood and wine, stories shared about Luna's first stumbling attempts to understand vampire culture, and Orpheus's careful courtship disguised as practical necessity. Emma told embarrassing stories about Luna's teenage years, while Alaric countered with tales of Orpheus's early vampire mistakes. Through it all, Luna and Orpheus sat together, hands entwined, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, the thin council member approached Luna and Orpheus with an expression that might have been approval. I misjudged the situation when we first met, he admitted. I saw only the risk of a human mate, the vulnerability it created. But I understand now that what you've built together strengthens rather than weakens. The Vampire King needed exactly what Luna provides: perspective, compassion, a reason to fight for more than just maintaining power. And Luna needed what you offer: Orpheus protection, partnership, a love that will extend far beyond normal human span. You've created something worth celebrating. Thank you, counselor, Orpheus said formally, though Luna felt his satisfaction through the bond. After the last guest departed, Luna and Orpheus retreated to their private chambers. They stood together at the window, watching the city lights while snow began to fall, the first snow of the season, marking another turn in the cycle that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Orpheus asked quietly. "Everything you gave up, your normal life, your anonymity, your simple safety?" Luna considered the question one final time, thinking about the boring accountant she'd been a year ago. That Luna had been safe but unfulfilled, secure but alone, living a life that was adequate but never extraordinary. She'd woken each day going through motions without passion, working without purpose beyond paying bills, existing rather than truly living. Now, she was the Vampire King's mate, respected and feared in equal measure, protected by ancient laws, and bound to a love that transcended human understanding. She faced dangers her former self could never have imagined, carried responsibilities she'd never sought, and lived in a world that most humans didn't even know existed. But she also woke each evening to the most magnificent male she'd ever known. She worked with purpose, bridging gaps between species and making genuine difference in people's lives. She'd found family in unexpected places, a vampire maker who treated her like a granddaughter, a household manager who became a sister, council members who'd grown from judges to friends. She'd discovered capabilities within herself she'd never suspected, strength she didn't know she possessed. "No regrets," Luna said finally, turning to face Orpheus. "Not a single one. You saved my life that night in the snow, but you did something more important. You gave me a life worth saving. A life with meaning and purpose and love. How could I ever regret that?" Orpheus pulled her close, and Luna felt his profound relief through the mate bond. "I was afraid you might feel trapped, bound to me by blood and circumstance rather than true choice." "The blood created the connection," Luna corrected. "But I chose you, Orpheus. I choose you every day when I wake up. I'll keep choosing you for as long as I draw breath and beyond, if possible." They stood like that as snow fell outside, two beings from different worlds who'd found perfect completion in each other. The Vampire King who'd lived 7 centuries alone, and the human woman who'd survived an attack that should have killed her. Together, they'd built something that defied expectation, a love that bridged mortality and eternity, danger and safety, darkness and light. And as the first anniversary of their meeting passed into history, becoming just another date in Orpheus's impossibly long life and a defining moment in Luna's comparatively brief existence, they looked toward the future with shared certainty. Whatever challenges came, whatever threats emerged, whatever complications arose from their unusual bond, they would face them together. Because some loves are worth fighting for. Some connections transcend logic and reason, and some nights that begin with death and terror can end with finding the one person who makes immortality bearable and mortality meaningful. Luna Prescott had learned that truth in a snow-filled alley 12 months ago. And Orpheus Obsidian, Vampire King of the Eastern Americas, had discovered after 7 centuries of existence that salvation sometimes arrives in the most unexpected forms, bleeding, frightened, human, and absolutely perfect. Their story was far from over. Decades and perhaps centuries stretched ahead, full of unknowable challenges and impossible adventures. But whatever came next, they would face it as they'd faced everything since that fateful night, together, bound by blood and choice and love that refused to be defined by the limitations of either of their natures. In the end, that was all that mattered.